But yeah, I spend most of my winter there in Portugal. The weather is normally pretty good. Even if it rains, it's not super cold. So
then there was a crash and I got stuck behind that. And then we kept jumping for another 45 minutes.
The 2026 Vuelta a España brings Tadej Pogačar back to a race he hasn't started in 7 years, and UAE Team Emirates-XRG called the 8-rider squad they built around him formidable when they confirmed it. Look past that word, and the roster tells a rougher story. One of the 2 riders assigned to protect Pogačar in the mountains has already signed with the rival team for next season. Another is riding on a neck broken in a crash less than 18 months ago. And the third GC option the team is bringing to Spain missed 2 of the year's 3 Grand Tours already, for reasons the team itself never fully explained. If you're the kind of fan who wants to know what's actually sitting underneath a World Tour roster announcement instead of just the headline, hit subscribe, because it helps videos like this one find more people who follow this sport past the results page. Pogačar didn't need the Vuelta. He already has 5 Tour de France titles, tying the record shared by Jacques Anquetil, Eddy Merckx, Bernard Hinault, and Miguel Indurain, and he already has a Giro d'Italia from 2024. A Vuelta win would complete something only 8 men in the history of the sport have ever completed, all 3 Grand Tours in a single career, and it would put him in a very short conversation with his own closest rival. Jonas Vingegaard finished his own sweep this year, winning the Giro in May after already holding a Vuelta title, and that timing is not a coincidence anyone in the sport missed. Pogačar's own history with this race goes back to 2019, when he lined up as a 20-year-old on his first ever Grand Tour start and finished 3rd overall with 3 stage wins, the result that first told the cycling world what was coming. He has not been back since, and the Vuelta's own race director, Javier Guillen, has already said publicly that this looks like the best year for Pogačar to finally do it, adding that he has little concern about the race turning into a one-man show. That is the kind of confidence an organizer says about the leader. It says nothing about the 7 riders around him, which is where this story actually lives. Some of that confidence is fair. One outlet covering the race pointed out that the competition for the overall win looks unusually thin this year, without an obvious rival at Primož Roglič or Vingegaard's level lining up against him. Roglič, the 3-time Vuelta champion, whose dominance of this race defined its recent history, is not in the field, and his absence is a significant part of why the road looks so open for Pogačar to claim La Roja in Madrid. UAE has also become the best-funded operation in the sport, by most outside measures, backed by ownership under team president Matar Suhail Al Yabouni Al Daher, and, since a deal struck in December of 2024, by the Abu Dhabi energy company XRG as co-title sponsor. Money bought this team depth on paper. It did not buy Sivakov out of a contract he'd already signed elsewhere, and it did not buy Almeida a season that went the way it was supposed to. The squad UAE built around him is, on its face, exactly what a team says when it wants to look unbeatable, headed by João Almeida, Jay Vine, and Pavel Sivakov, joined by Pablo Torres, a young Spaniard making his own Grand Tour debut on home roads after what the team called a solid season building up to it, the American climber Kevin Vermeerk, Pogačar's fellow Slovenian Domen Novak, and the Portuguese rider Ivo Oliveira, who will spend 3 weeks working alongside his countryman Almeida. 3 sports directors, Marco Marcado, Manuel Mori, and Tomasz Gil, will run the race from the team car. Pogačar called the motivation high and called the Vuelta a big target for finishing the season well. Nothing in that announcement was false. It just wasn't the whole picture, and it wasn't the first UAE Grand Tour squad this year to look stronger on paper than it turned out to be in practice. Start with Sivakov. He has been one of Pogačar's most trusted climbing lieutenants since joining the team in 2024, a role that followed 6 years at what was then Team Sky, and a personal story that runs through a change of racing nationality in 2022, when he chose to represent France instead of Russia over the invasion of Ukraine. By March of this year, French reporting had already confirmed where his career goes next, the 19-year-old French talent that UAE itself has been publicly linked to, and that Decathlon clearly does not want to lose. The transfer was framed at the time as a message as much as a roster move, aimed at Seixas and at every rival team still circling him, with Ben O'Connor and Laurens de Plus joining the same French project soon after. That message had a cost inside UAE's own selection room. When the team was building its Tour de France squad this summer, cycling media covering the process noted that Sivakov's presence was never confirmed, and that the looming Decathlon move did not help his case. He was ultimately left off the Tour lineup entirely, alongside Mikkel Bjerg, in a squad the team acknowledged was reshaped and different from the one that had ridden the previous year. So this Vuelta is not a continuation of Sivakov's season, it's closer to an ending. A rider who has already agreed to leave, riding what is very likely his last major race in these colors, in the mountains, in support of someone else's win, for a team that had already started planning around his absence. Then there's Vine, the rider defending the King of the Mountains jersey he won here 2 years running, the first rider to hold on to that title since Omar Fraile pulled off the same feat in 2015 and 2016. 12 months before this year's Volta a Catalunya, he suffered a cervical fracture in a crash at that same race, a broken neck that put the rest of his season in question. He spent the winter rebuilding, and he opened this year in what his own team called exceptional condition, winning both a stage and the overall title at the Santos Tour Down Under for the second time in his career. Then, at that same race, a collision with a kangaroo left him with a fresh injury and sent him back into rehab, this time at his home in Andorra, and it kept him out of this year's Volta a Catalunya altogether, the very race where he'd broken his neck the year before. He came back through the Volta ao Algarve in February, then Tirreno Adriatico, then the Vuelta al País Vasco, building steadily enough to earn a place on the Giro squad by spring, where the team's own director described his job in blunt terms: the rider who would sit at the front of the group in the Dolomites when the race hit its hardest stage. Vine put it more simply himself. He said he didn't come back for anything else. Whatever confidence that shows, it's still a rider asking a rebuilt neck to survive 7 summit finishes, barely more than a year after it was broken. Almeida is the harder case to explain, because nobody at UAE has fully explained it, and his year has actually gone wrong twice, not once. It's a strange fall for a rider who was the closest man to winning this exact race last year, finishing runner-up to Vingegaard by just 1 minute and 16 seconds. In mid-April, UAE announced its Giro d'Italia squad, with Almeida at the top of it, a genuine leadership chance built around a rider who had finished on the Giro podium in each of the previous 2 seasons, with Adam Yates named specifically as his senior mountain lieutenant for the race. French cycling media reported he was sick and would not start the race at all. The leadership plan that had just been built around him was scrapped before a single stage. Then, in late June, when the Tour de France squad was announced, he wasn't on that list either, missing his second Grand Tour of the season, and the explanation the team gave reporters amounted to a mysterious lack of form, nothing more specific than that. Whatever it was, it never got a proper name in public. What's true is simpler than any explanation would be. The Vuelta is the only Grand Tour João Almeida will start this entire year, after a leadership role collapsed under him once already, and UAE is sending him back out as a co-leader anyway. None of this happened in isolation. Back in March, UAE was hit by what its own performance staff called an injury wave, serious enough to pull the team out of Coppi e Bartali entirely, a race it had won twice the year before. Almeida was sick that week too. Brandon McNulty had crashed, though that one turned out to be short-lived, since he was back on the start line at Milan-San Remo days later. Marc Soler was out with an injury that was still being described as ongoing months afterward, still unresolved by the time the Tour squad was picked in June. The team had already promoted Luca Giammi, a 21-year-old rider, up from its development squad months ahead of schedule just to have enough bodies for its spring calendar. The context for all of it was a target the team had set for itself at the start of the year: 100 race wins across the season, after finishing last year with 97. An injury wave in March doesn't sound like it belongs in the same story as a Vuelta squad in August, but depth is not something a team rebuilds in a week. It's something it either has or it doesn't, and by August, UAE was still finding out which one was true. The season's roster churn shows up in smaller ways too. At the Tour de France, Isaac Del Toro made history as the first rider to start that race for Mexico, part of a tour lineup built almost entirely from scratch after the spring's absences, while Jonathan Narvaez was sent to the Giro instead, and Sivakov and Bjerg were left out altogether. Almost none of the 8 names on that tour sheet matched the previous year's squad. A team can present that kind of turnover as flexibility, and in a season this disrupted, it mostly had no other choice. 3 different Grand Tour squads, 3 different rosters, and barely any continuity between them heading into the one race left on the calendar. There is a version of this team that treats every jersey as sacred, not just the overall win. And this year, they arrive as actual defending champions of one of them. UAE won the team classification at last year's Vuelta and collected 7 stage wins along the way, a race Pogačar wasn't even part of that year. During this year's Tour de France, UAE chased down a dangerous breakaway at one point, purely to protect the team classification, a competition most squads treat as a footnote. That instinct, win everything or don't bother, is part of what makes UAE the operation it is. Because a team built to chase every classification needs riders who can actually do that for 3 straight weeks, not just survive them. That question matters more this year than most, because of the race itself. This is the 81st Vuelta a España, opening with a 9-kilometer time trial through the streets of Monaco. From there, the route runs through southern France and into Andorra before the race even reaches Spanish roads, then turns south toward a final 10 days concentrated almost entirely in Andalusia, ending in Granada on September the 13th. The route's hardest summit finishes include climbs like the Alto de Velafike and the Puerto de la Ragua in the final Andalusian block, and those 2 ascents alone will do more to decide who wears La Roja in the final week than anything in the first 10 stages. Along the way, riders will climb more than 58,000 meters, more vertical gain than that year's Tour de France covered, across 7 summit finishes and 2 individual time trials. It is, by most measures, the hardest route the race has offered in years. A course built like that does not reward one strong leader riding alone. It rewards a team that can put domestiques at the front of the group on the 9th stage the same way it did on the 2nd, which is exactly the kind of consistency that a broken neck, a transfer announcement, and an unexplained loss of form all work against. There isn't much room for error on the calendar either. Pogačar is due in Montreal on September the 27th to defend his world title, then at the Road European Championships in Slovenia on October the 4th, then chasing a 6th Il Lombardia in October after that. Granada to Montreal is a 2-week window, not much time to recover from 3 weeks of racing this hard, and every extra mountain he has to defend alone because Almeida is fading, or Torres is inexperienced, or Vine's neck has had enough, is a mountain that costs him more than it should. The riders furthest from the headlines carry more of this than they're built for. Torres has never finished a Grand Tour. Vermark and Novak and Oliveira are the kind of names that only get mentioned when something goes wrong for the riders ranked above them. And this year, something has already gone wrong for most of the riders ranked above them. A team with real depth uses its 4th and 5th options as insurance. A team without it starts leaning on them by the 2nd week and finds out in real time whether a Grand Tour debutant and a trio of support riders can hold a race together on their own terms, not just in service of somebody else's. Even if Pogačar wins the overall by himself, which is well within reach given how thin the rival field looks without Roglic in it, UAE needs stage wins to keep chasing its 100-win target for the season, and stage wins in a route this mountainous come from having multiple riders capable of attacking on different days, not from one leader marking his rivals for 3 weeks. They need the team classification, the competition they were willing to burn a breakaway to protect back in July. And they need a result strong enough to justify sending an 8-rider squad to a race Pogačar himself skipped for 6 straight years. A thin roster doesn't just threaten whether Almeida finishes top 5, or whether Torres survives his debut. It threatens every secondary target UAE has quietly built its whole season around, the kind of targets that don't show up in a headline about who wore La Roja into Granada, but matter enormously to a team this obsessed with winning everything, not just the one thing everyone's watching for. UAE Team Emirates-XRG earned more prize money at this year's Tour de France than any other team in the race, more than 3 times the total collected by the next best squad, and by most outside measures, it remains the best funded, most dominant operation in the sport. Wealth and depth are not the same thing though, and a roster sheet with 8 names on it can be formidable in theory, while still being held together, in practice, by a lieutenant who is already mentally left, a climber testing a rebuilt neck against the hardest stages of the year, and a co-leader whose only Grand Tour start of the season is this one, after his first one collapsed before it began. 8 riders line up on the rock in Monaco on August the 22nd. Whether they hold together through Andorra and the mountains of Andalusia is a separate question from whether the rider they're protecting can win it alone. If you want to see how this actually plays out once the race hits the mountains, stay subscribed, because that's where a roster full of question marks either holds together or it doesn't, and this one is worth watching stage by stage.